4 Years of Breakfast, aka 69 Diner Love Songs Part 3. Breakfast is not a stage, December 15, 2009. I wake up for breakfast. If done right, an American breakfast is cheap, satisfying and timeless. 2 eggs over easy have nowhere to hide and everything to prove, especially when they're on short order. Some people wake up for brunch. Brunch lovers, wafting through restaurant doors for a beautifully arrayed spread of poached eggs, afternoon greens, brioche, grapefruit, gourmet bacon and the hair of the dog, cross a gradient of dining that I cannot. I get into debates when I try to preserve the line between American breakfast and American brunch, as if I were drawing it in sand. I'm not, yet. With every new brunch menu that hits the table, the empirical distance between the two semantic cousins becomes more and more palpable in ways that make me think that I hate brunch. This turn was a long time coming. As a newcomer to the world of comestible obsessions in Berkeley, I discovered the joy of breakfast at Anne's Kitchen, an understated, high-turnover corner joint with sticky tables, plenty of Bruce Louisiana hot sauce and an owner who could memorize the name and face of a customer after 2 visits. Anne's breakfast plate, consisting of 2 eggs any style, 2 slices of toast with apple butter, and a molehill of the most impeccably crisped home fries in 3 dimensions, hit the counter 5 minutes after order for $3.45. It was food at its peak, brutally simple, yet impossible to replace. As years passed and I found myself sharing more and more morning meals with friends, I discovered that my enthusiasm for the off-the-cuff familiarity of Anne's was burnt crust compared to white-collar lust for the brunch experience. Each time I joined a weekend excursion for the same old overdressed basics, I felt a more disillusioned, by the long waits, the $12 plus tip price tags, and the over-seasoned, hyper-relaxed, late-morning banter. What struck me most, though, was the feeling that the simplicity of breakfast was being slyly replaced. Before long, no one wanted to go to Anne's with me. Sure, the food was good, the price was right, and Amoeba and Moe's were right around the corner, but it just didn't scratch that lazy, luxuriant itch that only a mimosa could pacify. I went on with my life, avoiding brunch outings when possible and not quite knowing how to explain my aversion to the meal in certain terms. Then, on the suggestion of a good friend, ironically, also a brunch lover, I had breakfast at Stage Restaurant in the East Village. If Manhattan was born with greasy spoon in its mouth, Stage would be that spoon, a short order holdover from a world in which entire meals were cooked on a griddle no bigger than the cook's torso, and no one had ever asked for granola. Unaffected by nostalgia, the Stage was simply one long counter of history. Elbow room was the only room in this alleyway of a diner, and the diners whose elbows rubbed against mine ranged from a scruffy student annotating texts over pancakes to a barely comprehensible IEBW member who used firm, stubby fingers to drive home his claim that Keith Richards was rock and roll's greatest guitar player. But you know who looked the best? Mick Jagger. He looked good, man. At the far end of the counter, as if by cue, sat an old man whose newspaper was more important than humanity itself. A bulky, wall-mounted payphone just behind him would ring for minutes at a time before Stage's senior waitress decided to oblige the occasional telephone order. As she repeated the words coming across the wire, cooks in the back room slid hot plates of food through a service window, from which they found their way to patrons at the counter. On the opposite side of the diner, blue-collar workers and cooks from the neighborhood stopped by on break, sweeping huge bags of food for their staffs from the counter and pushing off just as quickly as they had stepped in. Breakfast, prepared to order on the griddle just behind the counter, was a winner here. For $4.65, you could have 2 eggs any style, a molehill of home fries, 2 slices of toast, breakfast meat of your choice, and a bottomless cup of diner coffee. The gourmet choice was corned beef hash, prepared in-house and served under eggs. Thoroughly crisp on the edges, fluffy and pink on the inside, and seasoned with just the right amount of black pepper, Stage's corned beef hash, like a great burger, was a patty of victory for Americana. Stage's immigrant personality only enriched that victory. Despite the presence of a Russian-language calendar and at least one Russian-speaking staff member, I never figured out which one it was, but I placed a bet on the behemoth short-order cook, whose speech was indecipherable in any language that doesn't involve the words eggs over easy. Anyway, Stage was a solidly Polish-American establishment. Substitution of kielbasa for breakfast sausage and buckwheat kasha for potatoes, doused, by request, with mushroom gravy and grilled onions, was just a few words away. Where a brunch menu would attempt to surpass the essential with gourmet flair, Stage was much more content with the natural beauty of cultural assimilation, connecting comfort food dots across international borders and serving up the result in a melting pot of grease. The best representation of the diner's Polish-Ukrainian heritage was its soup. After all, any cook bred from Eastern European stock must benchmark their skill by the ladle. Stage never shied from the challenge, offering as many as 4 different type soups with a hunk of challah bread on any given day. Cabbage soup here was a bright, tender, and tart mix of kraut-like cabbage, potato and other vegetables. Highest praise, though, goes to Stage's Zurek, a diner-grade bowl of the rich, savory fermented rye classic that came with boiled potato and egg if you were lucky. It wasn't my favorite bowl, but it tasted exactly like the Zurek I would eat on the daily in random cafeterias when I was traveling through Poland. And, like fried eggs, it was served all day, every day. With places like Stage still making good on the promise of breakfast, I have little interest in the next iteration of Eggs Benedict. If I'm going to turn my weekend morning into a culinary experience, I'd much rather make a trip to Flushing to indulge in Taiwanese breakfast or play shortstop on an extended dim sum session. I could parlay my lazy hours into a wonderful, home-cooked breakfast in the apartment with friends, channeling emptied hours into a richer form of relaxation. Better yet, I could head down to Shopsons and put my wages and wait time to their best possible use. I suppose what Stage taught me is that I really don't hate brunch. I love American breakfast, as food, and as experience, and when I sat at the counter at Stage, no aspect of brunch could match that experience. Well-spaced tables, cloth napkins, pristine presentation, individualized wait service and the mantra of leisure are all imports of fine dining that don't add any value of mine when they latch themselves to a meal I love for its straightforward dishes, its workman's character and its ubiquity. American breakfast is a meal that requires no special context, no special menu and no special timing to be relevant. It simply has to satisfy. For a $5 meal, that's the roll of a lifetime.